Welcome, traveler, to Session Zero, the podcast where business and fantasy collide. Here we don't just talk shop, we roll for characters. Each episode, a new guest steps into our realm to forge their persona, D&D style. We'll explore their class, hear their origin story, uncover their starting gear, relive their first encounter, and of course, count the loot they've earned along the way. So grab your dice, sharpen your sword, or your CRM, and let's begin this quest together on another episode of Session Zero. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Session Zero. Really excited today, joined by a very close friend of mine who has made a name for himself in the project management space with his PMP courses. Casey, take a second. Let us know who you are and introduce yourself.
Hey, Sean, thanks for having me. I am Casey Ayers. I develop online training courses on project management and business analysis, as well as some other business-related topics. And I publish those through pluralsight.com.
I love it. I love it. How long have you been at Pluralsight?
I've been working with Pluralsight. Yeah, I've been working with Pluralsight for 10 years now, and I hit my millionth learner actually right around that 10-year mark last October. So It's been an awesome ride so far.
That's incredible. Yeah. Casey and I know each other very well in personal lives. I didn't even know that. So that's fantastic, Casey. Congrats.
Thanks.
Congrats. So the first question I want to ask you, Casey, is what do you actually know about Dungeons and Dragons, and what do you actually know about business?
Well, I know enough to muddle through as a player. I've never served as a DM, but I know a few, including this guy here, and so certainly have had fun. What I like about D&D is being able to bring teams together, have different perspectives and viewpoints, and not be limited in terms of the options of how a scenario might unfold the way that you might be in a video game, for example. It's not as simple as answering yes or no or hitting a certain button. There's always room for more creativity, and I think that that's absolutely the case in business as well. Not to conflate lore too much, but I guess kind of like a Kobayashi Maru Star Trek kind of situation. I think of D&D a lot there. I guess maybe Chris Pine is our connecting fabric there.
There you go, to the D&D movie, yeah.
Yeah, in terms of there's no such thing as a unwinnable scenario, right? Like there's always a new idea, there's always some sort of clever approach, and I think that's true in business also. Like you're never completely lost. There's always another route that you can take to get to where you're trying to go.
I like that. I like how you tied that back there. So Casey, as you know, what we do on this podcast is we create a Dungeons and Dragons character through the lens of what we experienced through business. Mm-hmm. And so the first thing we do whenever we're starting a new D&D session is we need to create our character. And so the first thing I want to ask you is, ahead of time, I sent you a few D&D classes that kind of have some attributes around what they might look like in a business setting. What do you think you are as a Dungeons and Dragons character? How would you portray yourself? What would you select?
Well, going based on kind of the descriptions that you provided, and then the ability to take a hybrid approach also, I think kind of rogue and druid would do a good job of kind of combining some of the strengths that I try and bring to the table. I definitely am always kind of zagging where other people might zig a little bit. I'm not necessarily exactly in line with the standard and conventional approach to things, so that might be some of the roguishness there. And then from the druid side, that seemed to make sense as well in terms of trying to be constructive and supportive.
Yeah, I hear that. You've had a very interesting, I would say, kind of upgrowth as you've gone through life and what you've done, right? Originally starting out in the banking world at Deutsche Bank, and then kind of moving off into your own. How do you see that as kind of through the lens of like rogue? We think of like this stealthy strategist, and a druid is like this adaptive person who can shapeshift to fit the environment that they're in. How do you kind of see that as you've moved through your career in that way?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's been my entire career has consisted of one era after another that's seems completely detached from kind of what came before. So whether that was originally working in banking to then taking a hard turn back into grad school and then founding a mobile app development company to then serving as a consultant, eventually chief operating officer for a healthcare startup that was focused on pharmaceuticals, like this is just such a weird array of different experiences. And then I decided to make it weirder by starting a travel blog where I focused on frequent flyer programs and how to use miles and points to travel the world. And so what I tried to find was what connected all of these different things so that I could do a better job of explaining what it is that I do and how I do it. And I came to the idea that these were all just projects and that I might be jumping from industry to industry, but in each case, there was a unique product or service being created of some sort. And I was following a pretty consistent flow of ideas and principles and processes in order to create each of these new adventures along the way. And so I was able to kind of define myself professionally as a project manager at that point, and begin to extend some of those skills into sharing them with others, which brought things kind of back to Pluralsight.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's a really nice bow you put on that in terms of like finding the commonality thread between everything. And you kind of led us to our next question. Very nice in terms of like, where did you get your start? What was this origin story? Often when we were creating our D&D characters, we need to have a backstory, right? What was that origin, that driving moment that kind of got you your start? Whether you kind of see yourself as this, redefining your career and moving forward as a Pluralsight author for now and forever, or as, having to adapt and shapeshift into a new role. Where did that start come from? That's kind of giving you your origin.
So I think there's always kind of a day zero, and then there's the time that also comes before that. And so
Yeah.
reflecting on both of those is kind of interesting to me. And I'm starting to give a little more credence to that before time also. But I'll give you the day zero first.
Yeah.
And that would be with my first job out of undergrad. I had originally begun in college with a double major in computer science and music performance because they allowed me to do that, even though credit-wise, that would have been basically impossible to pull off. But
Fun
over
fact, I did the same thing, Casey, whether you knew it or
really,
not. I
that's
I
fantastic.
I did that, yeah.
Well, and so over maybe a dozen iterations, then big tweaks and small tweaks along the way, that ended up turning into an econ and investment finance double major by the time I was done. And so working in finance seemed like the right approach. I loved the stock market, being able to pick names, know when companies were going to do well, be able to analyze them at a strategic level. It's still something that I can apply to skills now,
Yep.
even if it's outside of the market for sure. But what I found is that graduating in May of 2008 was, in fact, a very bad time to have a finance degree. And
Yeah.
so I started with that employer, and I was part of the Vanguard group of employees there, the very first ones that were hired for a new campus. And the idea was that many different functions were going to be brought to Jacksonville and that there would be a vertical path there. And so my idea was, hey, there's going to be room for kind of rapid improvement and promotion potentially as they look to build up this base and this new office. What I found out a couple of weeks in is that the plan had been changed, and they would instead be bringing only the lowest rung positions across a variety of departments down here. It was after that that I found out that the folks that were responsible for coming down from the New Jersey and New York offices to train us had been informed that they would be let go as soon as they could certify that we were able to do their jobs. And so you compound this with the Dow going down 600, 700, 800 points a day, especially back when that was a lot. And very quickly it became clear this was just not going to be the right fit. And so I needed to find a way out. And so
Yeah.
at that point, I think that's when I became, it became a priority for me to have a greater level of agency over my career future, that I wanted to make sure that I could be in charge of what my job would be and what it would look like at a much more active level than just accepting the first offer that I received out of my undergraduate experience. And so I got my MBA. I concentrated in entrepreneurship and marketing to help
Yep.
round things out at that graduate level. That led to the other experiences that I mentioned thereafter. And so I
Yeah.
look at that as really that formative moment of always keeping me kind of running and moving in a particular direction and making sure that I'm taking initiative every day toward my career goals. But then when I look backwards also, I see some of the other things that led me here more precisely rather than just somewhere else. I was doing video editing and audio capture back in the early
Yeah.
2000s, as early as 2001, 2002, when this was a pretty ridiculous thing to do. I remember I had a project where we had to make a presentation about a foreign city for geography class, and I had
Mhm.
chosen London, and everyone else made a typical science fair type board or perhaps a PowerPoint. I made a narrated video presentation that included B-roll and still images and things like this, except the problem was I couldn't figure out how to get it off of my PC. And so I had to take my full tower ATX PC, this big gateway chonky thing. You can't even find servers this size anymore, and bring it to school in a wagon so that I could hook it up to the monitor in order to be able to provide that presentation because I made it, but I couldn't figure out how to export it. So
Yeah.
when I look that far back, I've actually been teaching through video and forms like that for a quarter of a century at this point, which is crazy
Yeah.
to contemplate.
Yeah. And I mean, I love that image of you just like, walking through campus with a wagon with a giant PC in it. Especially you went to University of North Florida, so there's a
Yeah.
beautiful campus there. And just pulling the wagon through all the ponds in the swamp and hoping to God it
Oh,
didn't rain
this was
that
back
day.
in high school in Tennessee, but so it was up and
Oh
down
yeah,
some
yeah,
hills as well, and so yeah, it
yeah.
was kind of a farce, but it worked well, and as I
Hey,
remember, I got an A, so we'll take
hey,
it.
that's great. That's great. That leads us perfectly to our next question in terms of when we're building our characters, we need to make sure we're selecting the correct equipment to start our adventure, right? So if you're going out, you're going to need a sword, you might need a backpack and some boots and a lantern. But when we think about when we start off in business, it might be that
Mhm.
giant tower PC that you had that kind of led you into your video editing and production mindset. When you think about that, what do you think are some of the things you started with, whether that's a tool, an ally, a person, or a mindset that were really helped you start out in that way?
Well, in terms of the course creation that I've been doing for a while now, I did not find Pluralsight or have that on my radar. They found me. An acquisitions editor working with the company reached out and asked fairly shortly after I'd earned my PMP certification, which is in project management, if I would be interested in making courseware tied to that certification. That's not something that I considered at that point. I was actually considering full-time employment different places, and so the idea of taking on another consulting style gig was also something that I wasn't terribly sure of. But as I thought about it more, a few things came to mind. One, it was 35 hours of required training, and I didn't particularly enjoy the training that I had just finished. I had some notes on how it could be improved on by someone, right? And two, I always made the presentations for groups throughout the MBA program, back at UNF, even back in high school. Talking through PowerPoint or Keynote was something that I was very good at. And then I also looked in the gear closet and saw that I had my USB microphone in there because I used to have some podcasts related to video
Ah,
games and football
yeah,
and so forth. And so as I thought about it, I considered, well, I have all the different equipment, and I do have some thoughts on how I might do this differently, even though I don't really know what I'm doing. Let me try out making the first episode, and I'll do it kind of like a pilot where it can stand on its own as an introductory piece or serve as the start of a series. We'll see how this working relationship goes. I can do some business analysis on how it's going to perform, what I think that might mean in terms of its future success. Had some good access to the analytics for the platform at that point to do that with. And it was just an exceptional experience from beginning to end. And that made it very easy to just keep going and keep going. And it's been more than 100 courses now, but it started from that point of having various tools in place and then just having to realize how they might be configured or used differently than they have been in the past in order to accomplish something new. So go to your pantry of ingredients. We can make an entirely new dish that we never considered before out of the same stuff if we think about it a little differently.
yeah. If you could choose like one piece of software or equipment in your current setup, which I've been to his house and it is insane in terms of like what he actually has running to produce these courses. What is the thing you couldn't live without that you absolutely would need to bring with you into your future successes?
It sounds so ridiculous, but anyone who really is in tight with a piece of software can maybe relate. For me, it's Keynote, which is just Apple's alternative to PowerPoint. I could not do what I do nearly as efficiently or quickly. I could get to it eventually, but like literally working in PowerPoint instead of Keynote, just because it's different, just because I have so many skill points invested in knowing exactly how this works, exactly the flick of a trackpad to get from thing to thing so quickly to be able to create the sort of visuals that I might need to go along with some of the live video that's incorporated now, I would really be sunk. So I'm pretty agnostic when it comes to video editing software. I can work with Final Cut or Camtasia or
Yeah.
Premiere, or I need to learn DaVinci just to round things out. That doesn't really bother me. But yeah, just literally the
Yeah.
way that I make the visuals that accompany what I try and teach. I don't know what I'd do without it. So I'm glad it's still around.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Well, let's hope Apple doesn't sunset this like many of their
I
products.
was worried like
For
5 or
your
6 years
sake.
ago in particular. I thought it was kind of on death watch, and I
Yeah.
was really worried. So every time
Yeah.
there's just the slightest little updates and new features, that gives me some relief that like it's gonna remain not a
Yeah. It's
priority,
still in
but at
production.
least in the wheelhouse, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I feel that way about how like what I've done with HubSpot and now my new company, Super, in terms of like this is a product that I know in and out, and I could not move to a new organization if it did not have it, or it is so critical to my work stream and what it does that I would be lost if I didn't have it. And so I can definitely understand that
Yeah.
that
And you know how
affinity.
valuable it is, I'm sure, too, which is the
Yeah.
other piece of that, where it's like I can work it so well, but I also know exactly how to work it, right? And that's
Yes.
kind of two different things.
Yeah, I can make it, I know what the inputs are and what I'll get as an output, and how to go about that efficiently.
Yeah.
Um, so you had, like you mentioned at Deutsche Bank, right? When you went through, you came in out in 2008. Um, Definitely a challenge that you faced, right? When we go out on our first adventures as D&D characters, we're often going into a dungeon, or forced into a trial of some kind to test our characters. I want to focus on this Pluralsight, which you've been doing for the last 15 years. What's the biggest challenge you faced out of the gate, whether that's from like getting users to be adopted, getting those first 1,000 people to watch our videos? What were some of the things that you had to overcome as a challenge to start that pace for yourself?
I think probably the biggest thing was just taking on the scope of work that I had accepted and agreed to at that point. There was always the possibility that there would be some other authors who might come in and help contribute to a series, but I realized that there was a lot of business value if I could do all the work and if I could do it quickly enough to satisfy Pluralsight's need as well to serve their customers, which of course are by virtue my customers
Yes.
watching those courses. And
Yeah.
so my goal was I wanted to make the whole series if I could. But 35 hours or more of content was no joke when I had never done this before. And so the idea of being able to create that magnitude of training was foreboding at first in particular. But what it's fortunate what I had done just previous to this. Points Away was the name of the travel blog. And as part of trying to generate some more revenue with it, I released a book that explained in great detail, essentially an encyclopedia of all of these different frequent flyer and hotel programs, how to use each of them, best redemption ideas, all the different mechanics that you would need. So pretty much as of when it was released, everything you could possibly want to know about the most popular programs, here's exactly how to do it. And I put a ridiculous amount of effort into this thing. It was released on the iBook store in particular, because yeah, Apple fanboy, but more importantly, it had a lot of unique interactive tools involved that you can't do with platforms like Kindle. And
Yeah.
so I could have little slideshows built in. I could have interactive maps and charts, which are useful when you're thinking about numbers and destinations and so forth. And so I built all of this stuff, and it was like 400 or 500 pages long by the time I was done. So it's just a
Yeah.
phenomenal amount of work that frankly was not very successful commercially. And so it was useful that I came off of that experience so soon beforehand, because it would allow me to
Yeah.
look back in retrospect and go, well, I don't know how to write a book either, and I didn't know how to do any of the graphic design here, or
Yeah.
launch the entire business plan associated with that, or even just the content of the book itself until
Yeah.
the year or two prior. And so if I can do all of that,
Yeah.
then if I'm breaking this into smaller pieces anyway, if it's not 35 hours, it's 1 or 2 hours times a certain number of courses,
Yeah.
then maybe I can do it. It really is just one foot in front of another and think about what the next step is rather than get overawed by the overall size of the project. And so
Yeah.
I think that's what was most important, was to just keep in mind that when you're taking on something big, it doesn't help to really spend too much time thinking about the whole thing, but rather what's the very next thing that I can do in service of that mission?
I think you put on a really good point there. Like you said, the Points Away book was a commercial failure, right, in general. And I think when we look at our lives and our career, our business careers in general, we are built up to success over a series of failures, right? You learn more from a failure than you do from a success is something I hold very true to myself. And in sales, I often have a lot of failures, right? Whether that's I failed to get someone on the phone, I failed to get them to be convinced in the product I'm working through, or the process I'm working through, or the service I'm offering. I'm curious, what are some critical failure moments, that you felt that you feel helped propel you forward, right? Oftentimes when we're a D&D party and going into our first dungeon, we doesn't go well. And so what's a failure that you faced that you feel helped propel you into the next step even stronger than before?
Yeah, I mean, I think my first job in finance was definitely a great example of that. I never anticipated I would be leaving in 6 months, but that's what happened. And that wasn't something that I wanted from my first main employment opportunity out of the gate. So that was one. In the mobile app development space, we had a number of close misses that make for good stories at kind of cocktail time, but did not result in much in the way of revenue. We were extremely close to being the first app development studio for an NFL team, as well as then later for Walt Disney World. And we got beat out by the likes of Verizon at the time. Like these are crazy things that frankly, it's kind of fortunate some of this did not work out, because I don't think we would have been able to pull it off. And then that would have been a huge failure. Looking forward to, I love Points Away still as a brand and as an idea and being able to help people travel. But I was too late to the game, and so that was a matter of timing. Where a lot of the revenue streams that are available to some of the other names in that space, they're not open to new providers at this point for a variety of reasons. And so sometimes it's a matter of trying to learn from your mistakes and what you can do better. Thinking back to the pharmacy. My level of respect and understanding of the importance of cash flow, not just profit or loss on a per unit basis, was not nearly well enough evolved, and led to some serious operational challenges that got worse as we grew. And that was something that I was not prepared for, and I should have been. And so that was a hard lesson to learn and take in. Same with a lot of the management challenges I had there, leading a number of people for the first time. Other times, though, it's important also to acknowledge there wasn't necessarily a mistake on your part. It is just a matter of bad timing. I'm sure you can relate in the sales field. Sometimes they're just not a customer. Like it really isn't the right fit for them, and that's okay, because that, and that's as Thomas Edison put it, like another way not to invent the light bulb, and you can go about it in this other way. And so I think those are just as important. Like what can you learn from, and then also, where should you maybe not be as hard on yourself?
Okay. I love that. I think resiliency is something we need to learn in life that sales has taught me very well, to take yes and no with equal measure and be okay with either from someone. We're about time. I'll have two quick questions for you. The first question is going to be just a single sentence, and then the second is kind of a send-off. So first question, if you could leave someone with a mantra, a phrase, like what is the loot, the booty that you've achieved from this quest in your life so far? What's kind of a single sentence that you would say surmises that?
You already have the skills you need for the next challenge. You just need to think about them a little differently.
That's very profound. We definitely have some people in our lives, Casey, who could take that in and leverage them and move their career forward. And then last is just, I want to give a toast to the next person who joins us on this adventure. If you could leave one tip, mantra, or piece of advice for other adventurers, hold your coffee cup up, and what would that be for them?
Let's see. Happy hunting. Enjoy the next dungeon. That's what makes things interesting anyway. So if you're not feeling challenged, if you are incredibly sure of what you're supposed to do, then you probably need something more exciting in your life.
I love that. That's a perfect way to end this. Casey, thank you so much for being on here. Truly, truly appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule with your newborn to be here and join us. Thank you everyone for listening, and see you next time on Session 0.